Story 1. Something in the Attic. Having lived in an apartment for most of my young adult life, the desire for a place of my own gradually shifted from a distant dream to an achievable reality. The cramped spaces, the noise from neighbors on all sides, and the lack of outdoor space for my dog Murphy had worn me down over the years. It was time for a change, time to make the leap from renter to homeowner. I wasn't looking for anything extravagant. A modest starter home would do, just something with enough room for me to stretch out and a small yard where Murphy could run around. Luck, it seemed, was on my side. After months of searching, I stumbled upon the perfect little house. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but it was in a nice neighborhood, or so I thought. The living space was cozy, inviting, and just what I had been dreaming of. Best of all, it had a small, fenced-in backyard, a space where I could finally enjoy some peace and quiet outdoors with Murphy. Coming from the compact lifestyle of apartment living, I didn't have an overwhelming number of belongings to move into my new house. Yet the desire to make this house a home as quickly as possible drove me to dive straight into the sea of boxes and bags. With Murphy occasionally checking in to offer a comforting nuzzle or a curious sniff, I put my head down and went to work. Unpacking, organizing, moving, and sorting became my sole focus, as I aimed to carve out a living space from the chaos of transition. It was late afternoon when the momentum of my work was interrupted. The sound of the doorbell pinged through the house, and for a moment I was caught off guard. Murphy's ears perked up, and his gaze locked onto the front door. Who in the hell could that be? I thought to myself. I wiped my hands on my jeans and took a deep breath before heading to the door, curious to see who might be stepping into the very first chapter of my life in this new home. Standing on my doorstep was a man who claimed to be my new neighbor from around the corner. Something about him set off alarms in my head from the get-go, though. He was of average height, with a gaunt, pale face that made him look like he hadn't seen the sun in weeks. His hair was thin, greasy, and combed in a haphazard manner, as if he had made a half-hearted attempt at grooming himself before deciding it wasn't worth the effort. Perhaps the most unsettling part about him, though, was his eyes. They were a piercing, icy blue, which might have been striking under different circumstances, but here they just seemed cold and calculating. As he introduced himself, claiming that he just wanted to stop by to welcome me to the neighborhood, those unnerving eyes never seemed to settle on me. Instead, they darted past my shoulder, peering into the interior of my home as if searching for something, or someone. Murphy, who's usually the embodiment of friendliness, seemed to sense my unease. He growled softly, with a low rumble of distrust, from behind my legs. After a few uncomfortable minutes of back and forth, I decided it was time to wrap up our interaction. I thanked the man for taking the time to stop by, and attempted to convey the conversation was over without being overtly rude. He seemed to catch the hint, and as he took a step back from my doorway, he gave a half-hearted wave that lacked any real warmth. As I closed the door, he turned and began to walk away. Things got strange after that. The next day, as I was moving boxes from the garage, I noticed a car with heavily tinted windows slowly driving past my house. Once, twice, 3 times. It was odd. Was it a neighbor? Somebody looking for an address? I wasn't sure. The thought of the creepy neighbor from the day before did enter my mind, but at the time I was so focused on unpacking that I didn't recall if he had arrived by car or on foot. Nevertheless, I continued about my work. That night, I decided to make a quick grocery run. Murphy wasn't quite familiar with the new surroundings yet, so I thought it was best to just tuck him away in his kennel while I was gone. As I was pulling out of my driveway, I saw the same car from earlier parked further down the street. Something in my gut felt wrong. I felt like I was being watched, but I didn't know what else to do, so I continued on to the grocery store. When I got back, the first thing I noticed was that the creepy car that was parked down the street was now gone. But as I opened my garage, a chill ran down my spine. Boxes were scattered everywhere. The pull-down stairs to the attic hung ominously open, and fragments of attic insulation were strewn across the floor. Undeniable evidence that someone had invaded my home. My heart pounding, I rushed inside to find Murphy still in his kennel, trembling with fear and anxiety. It was then that I noticed the back door, kicked in, hanging off its hinges. I didn't think twice. I grabbed Murphy and bolted outside while I called the cops. The police arrived quickly, but it was clear from their search that whoever had broken in had already left. In the attic, amidst the chaos of thrown-about insulation, they found a hidden spot that had clearly been disturbed recently. The officers theorized that someone had been using my house, while it was vacant, to hide something. And now, with me moving in, they had taken the chance to retrieve whatever they'd stashed. I recounted the story of the odd neighbor and the mysterious car. In the days that followed, the police canvassed the neighborhood, but no one knew anything about the man or the vehicle. The intruder was never caught. Following that unnerving incident, I took immediate steps to ensure the safety of Murphy and myself. I replaced all the locks with sturdier, more secure versions, and installed a state-of-the-art security system to monitor every nook and cranny of our home. Looking back on the ordeal, my greatest relief is that nothing happened to Murphy or me. It was a harsh welcome to what was supposed to be our new home, but it appeared that the intruder got whatever they came for, and had no reason to return. As the months passed, the terror of that day slowly receded. Despite the rocky start, Murphy and I finally found peace and happiness in our new environment. The house has truly transformed into a home now, a place where Murphy and I spend countless hours playing in the backyard. Story 2. The Man Across the Street. I remember the first few days in my new home like it was yesterday. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and cardboard as I lugged box after box into the heart of what was to be my fresh start. Having recently accepted a new job in the area, the sense of anticipation was palpable. I was not just moving houses, I was stepping into a whole new chapter of my life, eager to embrace the opportunities and challenges that my new job and environment had to offer. Each unpacked box felt like making a small step towards making this place truly my own. As I worked away in the garage, meticulously organizing and bringing things into the house, an unexpected presence caught my attention. Out of nowhere, I noticed a guy sitting in a lawn chair in his garage across the street, watching me intently. By nature, I'm an introvert. I keep to myself and rarely initiate conversation with strangers. So, upon first noticing the man, I pretended I hadn't seen him at all and continued with my work, hoping he would lose interest. However, as time passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Every time I glanced up, there he was, his gaze fixed firmly on me, scrutinizing my every move without a blink. It was unsettling, the way his eyes locked onto my every move. After about an hour, I thought, enough is enough. Maybe a friendly wave would break the tension, make things a bit more neighborly. So I waved. For a minute, the man just sat there, like a mannequin, eerily still and silent. But then, finally, he gave me a slow, lifeless lift of the hand. No smile, no nod, just a blank stare. Well, I thought to myself, better than nothing. With that resigned acknowledgement, I turned my attention back to the task at hand. I had done my part, made a gesture of acknowledgement, however awkward it might have been. Now, all that was left was to mind my own business and focus on the job at hand. But it was difficult, having some weird creep watch my every move. No matter how much I tried to immerse myself in the task at hand, the unsettling feeling of being constantly observed lingered. Despite my best efforts to maintain focus, curiosity and a growing sense of unease compelled me to take another look after a few minutes. To my surprise, when I glanced up, all that remained was an empty chair. The man was gone, vanished without a trace. For a moment, relief finally washed over me. It was a reprieve to be free from those scrutinizing eyes, to not feel dissected with every move I made. But that relief was short-lived. For a moment I turned and started shifting boxes from one side to the other. After a few moments, though, a sudden, chilling sensation made me turn around. When I did, the man from across the street was standing there, just a few feet away from me, motionless, his gaze fixed intently on me. His sudden appearance took me by complete surprise, leaving me frozen, eyes wide and terrified. The man seemed to have appeared out of thin air, and his silent, unblinking stare was intensified by the fact that he was now standing only a few feet away from me. My heart began to pound through my chest as we both just stood there motionless, staring at each other. Finally, he spoke. "I'm Robert," he said in this eerie, flat tone. "Your neighbor, from across the street." We exchanged names, but the conversation felt awkward and strained. After a few aimless questions, he turned and walked back to his house, displaying little emotion, as if it were his first interaction with another human being. The encounter left me so unsettled that I decided to shut the garage door and work inside for the remainder of the day. I kept mulling over the bizarre interaction as I worked into the night, unable to shake off the discomfort it had caused. It was, without a doubt, the creepiest interaction I'd ever experienced in my life. Finally, around midnight, I decided it was time to call it a day. As I lay in bed, I did my best to fall asleep. I closed my eyes and tried to relax, but sleep was elusive. It might have been the unfamiliar surroundings, or perhaps it was the unsettling encounter with Robert, but whatever the reason, I found it incredibly difficult to drift off. As I lay there with my eyes shut, I can't explain what it was. Maybe it was a sixth sense, but something urged me to open my eyes. When I did, my heart plummeted, and a wave of terror washed over me as I saw Robert, shirtless, standing at the window, staring straight at me. Panic took over. I screamed and grabbed my phone as I leaped out of bed. As I did, I could see Robert dart back towards his house. When the police arrived, I watched from my front window as they made their way across the street to speak with him. As they approached, another man answered the door. I could see him talking to the officers, his body language becoming increasingly agitated, as if he were deeply apologetic. The sight of him, so visibly upset, added another layer of complexity to the already unnerving situation. Eventually, the story of Robert finally unfolded. Robert had a long history of mental illness. The man at the door turned out to be his brother. He was simply trying to take Robert in and look after him, doing his best to manage a troubling situation. It became clear that he was grappling with the weight of Robert's issues, striving to provide care and stability in the midst of challenging circumstances. In the end, I didn't press charges. The last thing I wanted was to make a difficult situation worse. The following day, Robert's brother came over and apologized profusely. He provided a bit more detail about Robert's situation and assured me he would do his utmost to ensure nothing like that happened again. I understood the complexity of the circumstances and told him not to worry about it, expressing my hope for a peaceful resolution for both of them. Eventually, Robert was readmitted to a mental institution, seeking the professional help that his brother could not provide. This step, though difficult, was necessary for his well-being and safety, ensuring he received the care and support needed to address his condition. Years have passed since then. I've seen Robert a couple of times when he's visited his brother, but we've never spoken again. I've now settled into my new home and job, and I genuinely enjoy where I live. I haven't had any other problems, and life has found a comfortable routine. But as long as I live, I'll never forget that first day in my new home. It was a crazy experience, one that I'll never forget. Story 3. Our son's new friend. Many years ago, my wife and I made the decision to leave behind the cramped, relentless pace of city life. We wanted space, quiet, and a place where our son could run and explore without the constraints of concrete walls. So, after some searching, we found a beautiful home on the outskirts of town that seemed to call out to us. It was perfect, with more than enough room for the three of us. The house had a beautiful, sprawling front yard, where we envisioned summer barbecues and games of catch. It was a place where our son could tumble in the grass and chase after bugs. In the backyard, there was a serene space nestled up against a wooded area that stretched on for miles, a natural wonderland waiting to be explored. It was an idyllic setting, one where adventure and tranquility coexisted, offering us a slice of paradise just beyond our doorstep. This wasn't just a new home, it was a new beginning, a place where we could build memories, where our son could grow not just in size, but in spirit too. About a week after we settled into our new home, our son began to show a deep fascination with the backyard, especially the mysterious expanse of the wooded area beyond. My wife and I would often stand on the back deck, sipping on some tea, watching him with a mix of curiosity and cautious intrigue. He seemed captivated by something beyond the tree line, engaged in what appeared to be one-sided conversations with an unseen presence. He did this frequently, his small figure dwarfed by the vastness of nature as he chatted away animatedly. Each time we noticed, we'd exchange puzzled looks and venture closer, curious about this invisible friend he seemed to have made. But as we approached, the sounds of his conversation would fade into the rustling of leaves and the quiet of the woods. Peering into the shadows between the trees, we found no one there, no evidence of another soul taking part in the conversations. It left us perplexed, wondering about the workings of our child's imagination, yet also slightly unnerved by the intense attention he paid to the silent, watchful woods. When we finally asked him about these conversations, he simply smiled and told us he was talking to his new friend Bob. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, attribute it to the creative workings of a child's mind, a figment of his vibrant imagination. Yet there was something about the way he said it, with a certainty and fondness, that gave us pause. Chalking it up to just a kid's overactive imagination, we nonetheless couldn't shake off a sliver of worry that lodged itself in our thoughts. It's one of those unspoken fears that you try to dismiss but can't entirely escape. So, my wife and I agreed, without needing to say much, that we would keep a more vigilant watch whenever he ventured near the woods. One night, I was startled awake by what I believed to be the sound of slow, cautious footsteps on our deck. My heart skipped as I sat up and strained my ears, hoping it was just my imagination. Not wanting to disturb my wife or alarm our son, I eased out of bed and tiptoed downstairs, moving as quietly as possible. As I reached the window overlooking the deck, I took a moment and peered out, but there was nothing, just the dark, sprawling expanse of our front yard. The night was still and undisturbed. I stood there for a while, watching, waiting, but everything remained still, revealing nothing. Paranoia, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease that had taken grip of me just a few moments ago. And with that, I made my way back to bed, slid under the covers next to my wife, and fell back asleep. The following night would be vastly different. It started with a subdued commotion in the kitchen, a sound muted yet loud enough to pull us from our sleep. My wife, ever the protective mother, assumed it was our son, perhaps on a late-night quest for a glass of water. She slipped from the bed and tiptoed softly out of the room. Caught between wakefulness and sleep, I lay there, expecting nothing more than the comforting murmur of her voice reassuring our son. What came instead was a scream that cut through the night like a blade, a sound so primal and fraught with terror that it sent ice through my veins. My wife's voice, twisted with fear, called out for me, screaming with panic in the dark. Adrenaline surged, and I was on my feet before I knew it, sprinting towards her voice. Bursting into the kitchen, the scene that greeted me was one of terror and chaos. The back door was wide open, and there, on the other side of the threshold, was a figure, a man, retreating into the night. My body acted on impulse, and I gave chase. As I leaped off the back deck in pursuit, I misjudged the distance to the ground in the darkness, and fell. By the time I managed to scramble back to my feet and regain my bearings, the intruder was almost completely swallowed by the woods. As I rushed back inside, my wife had already made her way to our son's bedroom to ensure his safety. Thankfully, he was unharmed. As the police arrived, a terrifying realization began to unfold. "It was Bob! It was Bob!" our son repeated, his words chilling us to the core. "I talked to him out in the woods. He said to unlock the back door tonight before I went to bed, and he'd come visit me." The horrifying truth dawned on us. Bob wasn't a figment of our son's imagination. An actual person had been lurking in the woods, speaking to our son from beyond the tree line, just out of sight from our watchful eyes. The police made their way into the tree line that night, pushing as far as they could into the dense foliage. The next day, a more thorough search was conducted, and it led to the discovery of an abandoned campsite about half a mile into the woods. There was little doubt in our minds that it belonged to Bob. By then, though, he was long gone, never to be seen again. Following that incident, we left nothing to chance with our new home's security. We installed an alarm system and established strict rules for outdoor play. Our son was expressly forbidden from nearing the tree line unless he was within arm's reach of either his mother or me. The incident initially made settling into our new home a challenging endeavor. However, with time, we managed to adjust. Our son has since grown up, now a young man capable of looking after himself for the most part. My wife and I continue to reside in the home to this day, and despite everything, we have no regrets about moving there. Nonetheless, we remain vigilant and cautious, always aware of the unknowns that may hide within the darkness of the woods behind us.